Welcome to Be Simply. This is she, aka Suzanne Toro, and today we have special guest Sebastian Siegel. He is a writer, producer, director, and author, and we're going to be celebrating his recent release of Grace&Grit, starring Mina Suvari and Stuart Townsend. This film is based on a true story written by Ken Wilber. As Marianne Williamson said it so beautifully, Grace&Grit is an epic love story. Sebastian's adaptation of this powerful book stays true to the source. The movie is a testament to the transformative powers of love. In addition, John Mackey stated, like the book it's adapted from, this film is brilliant. Grace&Grit will shake you and maybe even awaken you in some way. This movie is a must see, especially for anyone interested in love or consciousness. So, without further ado, let's dive in with Sebastian Siegel.
All right, here we go. So I want to welcome Sebastian Siegel. He's here to celebrate his great work with Grace&Grit. He's a writer, producer, director, and author. So Sebastian, thank you so much for coming here today, and I'm really excited to talk about your great creation and release as of yesterday. So how are you
It's a pleasure
doing?
to.
Yeah, how are you doing today? And what have you absorbed, because in the past week you've been at a film festival, you've been interviewed quite a bit and getting rave reviews about Grace&Grit. Uh, for you, just on a personal level, before we dive in, how does that feel as far as a feedback loop with, having this journey to here?
I appreciate the question because I think to achieve anything in life, my sensibility is that we have to be in service to it. So whether it's love or relationship or vocation, whether it's gardening or painting or child rearing, we have to be in service. And so, in the one way that the self and the ego is a great vehicle for the soul to be able to transform, ultimately, I think in order for that transformation to occur, when we take ourselves out of the equation and we put ourselves in great service to the thing that we're doing, is when we yield the most light and the most flowers and the most plants in the garden, and therefore the most love. So in terms of how do I feel, I feel great, but I feel it's not about me. I'm just in service to this story. I feel the best when I'm in service to something, and I think this
Mm,
movie is really about being in service to love and how love transforms us when we're in service to it. So it's the same thing. I look at everything long term, many years, 5, 10, 20 years going in the future. And then I think about this brief instant of life that we have here, and think about just moving the bicycle forward and appreciating the view, and also being dedicated to breathing in the air and to pedaling. So
yeah.
when I say moving the things forward. So it's wonderful that people are responding, to the film. I'm just one of many, many amazing artists who collaborated in order to bring this to the screen,
Mm.
and so I'm grateful to have partnered with all of these, wonderful people, and been able to be here now to have the opportunity to create this film.
Beautiful, and such a, there's so many layers to this movie. As we dive into being of service of love and just the possibility of love, what struck me is that, oftentimes we have ideas about how love will arrive and the conditions and the setting, and that they have to be just right for us to be ready. And sometimes, like in this story, just to turn into it anyways, even though maybe it's not what we would have written on our screenplay of life as a circumstance. Uh, can you share a little bit about, because there obviously was some serendipity for you to end up as the one to write the screenplay from a book, which is not an easy feat. A lot of times people do not like the movie that's made from a book, but everyone is really resonating with it. And then I think maybe people read the book that haven't read it, So that's kind of fun too. For you, what was the calling for you to dive into? Obviously, you have a relationship with Ken, maybe from years back, but what spoke to you most about taking on this project?
First off, it's beautiful what you said about the script for our lives and having a story and a sense about how things are supposed to unfold. And you think in stage one of getting out of our own way, and this sort of very like sage, whether it's Socrates, Plato, or Aristotle, that we have to conquer the self in order to allow the world to happen in the most magnificent ways. And really what that is instead of allowing the subconscious to always affect the conscious, in other words, instead of making abstract decisions that we're not aware of, what do we eat, who do we spend time with, where do we give our attention, the idea behind conquering the self is that we use the conscious mind to influence the subconscious. And then there's a feedback loop then where the subconscious comes up and drives our decisions so that they're wiser, so that they're more gracious, so that they're more engaging, so that they're more compassionate, so that they're more fluid in the world, which is a natural state. So I appreciate what you said about that, and referencing that to the movie about not being trapped by a story of what we think love ought to look like. This person ought to be this and do this and have this and treat me like this, etc. Instead, just saying, whoa, love is showing up in my life. And this is amazing. And this is a little prickly. It hurts a little bit. But you know what? That's allowing me to get stronger and be more graceful here. This person, whether it's a parent or a child or a friend or a lover or vocation, this person agitates me in a way. Because this elicits a response, what an opportunity for me to grow and learn and become more and serve more. Then that's really when we're in the seat of love, right? When we're like, whoa, it's like anybody. And for example, just to use a very basic analogy, if we go outside and it's brutally hot or it's brutally cold, at first we're like, no, I want to get warm, or I want to get, I want to ease off on the heat. But then we get out there long enough and we say, you know what, this heat or this ice cold is really doing something for me. And then we fall in love with it. Like taking ice cold showers. When I first moved to California, the water ran out at the place I was renting. And I had to go downstairs in the morning and shower off in a cold hose. And at first it was like, oh God, I wish I had hot water. But I became hooked on that. So for the last 20 years of my life, I have to have an ice cold shower. And if I go somewhere and there's no hot water, no problem. If there's no cold water, I'm like, so in other words, I by force, I've transformed into adoring something in life that I've then discovered a new terrain in myself. And I think that's the mechanism of love, whether it's in relationship, is to be open. So I really appreciate what you said there about that. In terms of what drew me into the film and why was I interested in making it, it's very much the same within that theme. So I think your intuition is right on point. That I read the book, I was blown away, and people around the world in many languages, whether it's Spanish or Japanese or German, were also blown away. And I was like, the movie, it's such an emotional story, and yet there's something that's inspiring and ultra uplifting about it, right? And so I was really thinking about all the love stories that are out there. There are so many that are cliche or written in a way that just love doesn't happen like that. But then there are several which really describes the unique qualities in love. In other words, that we have to overcome something within ourselves in order to open ourselves to a greater love. And even in some very popular movies that are wonderful, like The Notebook, really that's the story about these two characters. They have to overcome some expectation within themselves,
Right.
her and him, about the way love ought to be in order to find the love they really want, that they never would have ascribed to, right?
Yeah.
And it's the same thing then, I think, if we look at a movie like Titanic. What's interesting about Titanic in relationship to this film is that Titanic is not really about the sinking of a ship, right? The movie, the love story.
Yeah.
It's just that the sinking of the ship forces these two characters to confront their mortality. And so then to engage in decisions that they wouldn't have done long term.
Yeah.
Long term, she never would have been with this guy on this boat.
Yeah.
And he never could have been with her, would have been with her. They agitated each other. But because this ship was going to sink and they had to confront their mortality, then they said, you know what? I love you and I want to be with you. And then by the ending moment, they're just saying, just hold on to me. Never let me go. Never let go,
Yeah.
Jack. Never let go. And it's so beautiful. And I think that people cry in that movie, as I did when I saw it, because it speaks to something in our soul that says, hey, we may think we're here for another year or 5 years or 20 years or 30 years or whatever things, but whether it's a day or 30 years, it's going to go by in an instant. We only have this much. We only have one lightning flash of an instant and life goes by. Let's really engage in that. And I think when people cry at the end of Grace and Grit, or at the end of Titanic, or at the end of Ghost, or at the end of Love Story, or at the end of The Notebook, or at the end of whatever the movie is, it's because we have to confront within ourselves the reality that life is terminal, that it's going to end any instant now. And that if we don't engage now in love, we're never going to get the chance. And we almost cry because we're afraid that we might step forward and we might not take that chance. We might not jump into love. And it's sort of a reminder to ourselves to say, hey, it's going to be scary. But if you really want to live this true love, you've got to confront and acknowledge and accept that fear. So in terms of the question, what drew me into this book and to make it into a film, I was lightning bolted in the heart by love. And I said, I've got to be in service to this. This is an amazing reference point for what's possible in love. And I want to be in service to bringing that to the screen so that more people can know the story and be inspired by the story in the same way that I was, and in the same way hundreds of thousands of people around the world perhaps have been.
Oh, and so if you can share, since this phrase, be in service to love, in your work, because you get to touch a lot of people. I mean, just even building this film, if people go and look at all the credits, I mean, the cinematography is beautiful, everything's just exquisite. But to be in service to actually that word throughout your life, where has that taken you, even within this project, where maybe you opened up more beyond what you thought you knew about love?
Can you specify that question a little?
Well, what
more?
within this, even if we keep it in the context of this film, and then all the people that you interact during the film, what where did it take you a little bit deeper? Because typically when we're in service to something, we it deepens within us our understanding of what it is. It's like the little ahas, like wow, this is what it is. And I imagine for Ken and Treya, they didn't, that was not the play they wanted to write out for their story and time together, but they served them both so much on so many levels. But for you, how were you deepened in the understanding of love through this process?
I think it's, it's largely ineffable, right? I mean, even just this conversation that we're having right now, right, is a learning process, is a way that we get to explore ourselves and get to know ourselves, through this discussion. And I think that through any time we're on the floor and we're dancing, we get to know the steps in a different way if we're really fluid. And you look at great dancers of Argentine tango, let's say, and there's a very strict discipline behind Argentine tango. And yet the objective, ironically or paradoxically, is that when the dancer goes to dance is to let go totally, to be totally fluid and free, and to mind both the discipline of the dance and the freedom of the dance. And I think that in terms of that, I think that speaks to a practice that brings about deepening throughout a process that never ends. Kind of like a relay race where we carry a torch and someone else carries it and someone else carries it, and then maybe we carry it again in some other form, right? And so I think about there never being an ending, there only being steps. And so when I think about the deepening for my own personal being, I try to breathe it in and just feel it in every moment, right? Because there's no moment is final. Every moment is absolute, but no moment is final. Yeah, and everything continues to proliferate, beyond, whether it's a parent's genes are carried forward from an offspring, from a child, or a seed is scattered far and wide and it gives birth, and yields a new forest, or a story, is carried down and brings about so many new conversations. And so I think about my own deepening as just a process of enjoyment, as one beat in the music, as one instant in the dance.
Right.
I think if I had to put a button on it, right, I think that I do have great respect for the relationship between liberation and discipline. For saying, hey, I'm really going to be mindful of the care I need to give here and take here. Yeah, I'm going to be at my best, and there's a discipline behind that.
Right.
And then also within that discipline, or around that discipline, to be totally free and open. Yeah, and that's always a challenge, for all of us in every way, no matter where we're from, no matter what we're doing, no matter where we're going. And I respect that. It's interesting because I was talking this morning with someone about the movie The Black Swan. And in that movie, I think articulates that very clearly, that this girl wants to dance the Black Swan, but she can only dance the White Swan. And so she's unnerved by this other girl who can dance the Black Swan so well, and it has nothing to do with her, but she's so unnerved by this other being that's totally unrelated to her, really. But it's the thing that ultimately is so salty for her. But then ultimately that's the thing that allows her to break free, that it had to grind her a little bit, it had to unnerve her, unseat her, unsettle her, in order for her to open up and become more. And had she never given into that discomfort, she never would have opened up. And then I think that it's interesting because that character follows a similar, on one line of the arc of that character, follows a similar arc to Treya in Grace&Grit, in the way that at the beginning, I want to do this, I want to get this. It's all solution oriented. So in Black Swan, it's I want to get, I want to be able to be the best dancer. I want to dance the best dance. I want to do it this way. And for Trey, it's I want to get the guy and keep the love and make the relationship work and beat the illness and get better. And then by the end, in the Black Swan, she says, well, you know what? I'm going to dance as well as I can, and I'm going to let all the salt and all the sugar in. And then she dances beautifully. And then at that moment of total acceptance and release, she's ready to move on to the next. And so she dies, and it's death with transcendence. Yeah. Right. And it's the same thing then here with Treya, that at the moment she says, you know what, I'm gonna give my best to being as healthy as I possibly can. I'm gonna give my love fully to this man and to our relationship. Right. And then at that moment, she's totally at ease. And then she's almost allowed herself karmically to step forward and step beyond. And so then there, it's also death with transcendence. Yeah. So I think that's and I think that's a valuable, I think that in art, whether it's in paintings or music or movies, to bear witness to that and to reference that speaks to something within ourselves about the importance of honoring that juxtaposition of giving ourselves fully, but also letting go fully.
Yeah. Well, and you speak a little bit about the value of friction. So a lot of people aren't comfortable with friction. Being you're a person that likes cold showers in the morning, you like maybe a little bit of the uncomfortable. From your perspective, even within this film, where did you utilize the tension or the friction to become the catalyst to get more out of your actors, to direct in a way that went beyond, the comfortable maybe?
That's great. Yeah, none of us are ever comfortable. We're comfortable with a certain amount of friction until it's the point that we're uncomfortable. And then that's really the point we need to lean into it. Like in any meditative practice or in any yogic practice, right? When the stretch becomes really uncomfortable, that's really the beginning of the stretch. That's when it starts. That's not when you're into it. That's like that's step one, right? It's like the same thing with exercise or whatever the meditative practice is. Like when we're extremely bored in a meditation, that's the beginning.
Yeah.
whether that's a year or 10 years or 5 minutes in, whatever the thing is, that's the beginning. And I think in film, what's so amazing about film is that you have, 100 or 1,000 people on a movie, and you're together for this truncated period that demands, there's this schedule that's rigorous, and so it's ultra collaborative, right? Every department, is working together to create and put this picture onto the screen. And so by nature, you're working, let's say 4 a.m. to midnight every day for a month or 2 months or 3 months or whatever the thing is. And just by sheer statistics, if you have that many people coming together for every day, the odds that one person is going to come to set and they've lost a lover or a friend or something like that is almost 100%.
Yeah.
But because it has to come to an end, we can't bring that to work.
Right.
That's something really, that's a really a standard to rise up to. And then the converse of that is that we must then, if we continue to work, in making film or any kind of collaborative venture like that, understand that, hey, someone who came to set today probably lost a lover or a friend or had a devastating thing or whatever the thing was, and we have to not know who that person is going to be. And so then engage with and treat every person as if they're that person. And I really appreciate that aspect of film, by recognizing the value, whether it doesn't matter if it's craft or, DP or lighting or grip or actor or director or producer. Every being is integral to the success of the film, just like every being is integral to the beautiful picture in life, to look at a film as a microcosm of that.
Yeah.
And so I'm a student of that in the way that really helps a film really work well. And for me as a director and as a producer, I drive a set in that way, that's deeply collaborative. And so, if the question is, at what point am I using this sort of friction or discomfort to make a better picture? I allow those things are going to come up naturally, and my tendency is to have a very Tai Chi sort of Zen way about it. I do an enormous amount of preparation in every department, whether it's light or lens or acting or craft or script or locations or wardrobe or costumes, etc. And so then when the moments come up on set, let's say an actor is really not sure about something, is it true to the story? Does this thing look right? Does it feel right? They really want to know because their career is on the line also. And they also want to do something that's truthful. If I know the answer, I'll speak to it. But if I'm not sure, instead of speaking to it, I'll discuss it with him. I'll say, well, what do you think? And then I'll bring someone else in the room, maybe someone who's a specialist beyond my specialty, so the prop master, somebody who's in production design, I might bring them in and say, hey, are we sure that this tank or this car or this book really belongs in this scene? Is this really from 1987? 100%, and then we get to the bottom of it, right?
Yeah.
In other words, I think that to answer the question in short, to be totally comfortable with those fires or those points of friction when they come up, and to allow them as gifts. Yeah. Okay, this is a gift. What do I have to learn here? As opposed to, oh my God, I've got to answer this and move on. No urgency. But by allowing it in as a gift, it then supports the solution.
Beautiful. And
a little bit of salt makes the cake so much sweeter.
That's
right?
true. It makes fruit sweeter too. Uh, uh, so, being that you have, you know, consciousness as part of your discipline, meaning, I mean, we all have consciousness, but you choose to engage with it. How from being like on a set, maybe as a participant, not the director and producer, versus um, what you choose to create, uh, how do you feel that's shifting within even your industry? Because there's a lot more awareness, I think, to people being mindful and aware. They use these words, but they don't necessarily all the time know the depths of them. Uh, for you, how do you feel that aids to the success of your project? Because even this is a tall order, what you did. Like you took a book, wrote a script, and made a beautiful film. And it's very rare that that's successful, Sebastian.
True.
And it's a standalone too, even if someone didn't read the book, it's still this beautiful standalone. Um, so how much is it so in part of you, your practices, meaning your meditation, your Zen approach to life, is it so much a part of your day-to-day existence that it's just there? And then how do you use those practices to help others maybe touch it when they're not even aware of having that state of being in life?
You mean as a filmmaker, like bringing equanimity, how does that serve the process?
Absolutely, yeah. Because you could go to a lot of sets and see a lot of different things, uh, you
Yeah, yeah.
know, and so there's this essence, and then creation. It's kind of the imprint. In Zen, if I come in the room and stomp around and throw my keys down, you're gonna be like, "Whoa, what's going on with Suzanne?" Or if I come in and mindfully close the door, put my keys down, I'm conscious. That's different. The same is happening when you say action, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because there's something subtextual arriving. So, how do
Mm-hmm.
you help your cast and crew, I guess, transcend that? And then, how do you help when you're on a set that doesn't even operate with those ways and means by just your state of being? What's possible within that? Because a lot of people don't know what's possible within that.
You as a director, as a producer, you're driving the ship. So that gives an opportunity, just like in a restaurant, the atmosphere is dictated from the top down. Yeah, so someone comes to the table and they're a lovely waiter or server. Yeah, because they appreciate the work, and probably the owner of the restaurant's lovely, right?
Yeah,
And more often than not, somebody comes to the table and they're lousy. Probably they don't have a great relationship with the owner. Yeah, and so I think as writer director, or as director, as producer, it's the responsibility of the producer and the director to create a ship that's really fun to be on.
yeah,
To create a vessel that's exciting. Yeah, because it's like everyone wants to make. Everyone in film or in any vocation wants to do whatever they're doing. Let's really make this fun. We've got an objective, but let's make this fun. That's the purpose,
yeah.
right? So I like to drive a really fun set. And then by nature, that's collaborative. Yeah. And so I had the time of my life, shooting films. I love shooting films, but I've been on sets, that were not nice to be on, where the director screamed and yelled and people were uptight, and it's awful. It's unpleasant. Who wants to do that? Who cares? What are we really doing here? What an awful way to spend life. Like, I remember thinking that, like, I've been on sets thinking, like, why is this person even doing this? It's a horrible experience. And everyone who's been on enough sets has a story about some director, some producer who's horrible.
Yeah,
And there's this, like, there's no, life is too short. It's too short, and it's too beautiful to bring in a thunderstorm for no reason.
right,
Um, Now, that being said, the pressure is enormous, right? You're
right.
spending millions of dollars in a very short period, and you're beholden to a very high responsibility to deliver a product that is an artwork, but is also a business. And so the pressure on that is very high.
Yeah,
So that being, with that going in mind, it's important that everyone does enormous amount of prep and does their homework and shows up. The actor's ready to perform, knows their lines, is super, prepared, looks the part, that the director knows everything that's happening on the film, on every level, that everybody's prepared, that the costumes were. So when you have one person or two people or three people that aren't prepared, it starts to show up. You start to see little splinters and you can identify them. And then when those things happen, for me as a director, as a producer, it's going to that department or going to that person and saying, hey, okay, I can't get now upset with this person. There's no point,
yeah,
because here we are. We're 6 hours in today. We got another 10 hours to go, and we got 10 more days or 20 more days to go. What are we going to do here? So it's about saying, hey, this is what I think is occurring. This is how I think it could be better. What do you think? Yeah. That I try to be
yeah,
solution oriented that way.
yeah,
In terms of actors, an actor is on the movie the shortest time, really. Yeah,
Mm.
that so many people are doing such an enormous amount of prep and such an enormous amount of post that can be weeks or months or years.
Right.
An actor's only on it for a very truncated period, shooting and prep, and that's about it. And then some interviews and such afterwards, right?
Yeah.
But the actor's entire career depends on this short truncated period.
Right.
So, if an actor always wants to know the first thing, who's the director? Which is why it's so hard for directors to get their first picture, because the actor has to trust them,
Mm.
has to believe in them. Not what they think, not what they feel, but really believe that they're going to be able to execute this painting. Because
Mm.
otherwise the actor may not work. The actor can look ridiculous.
Yeah.
Especially if you're going to, in an emotional piece, push an actor to be beautiful and ugly and emotional and gentle and cruel and angry and fight and embarrassed and proud and glorious and cry and love and make out and have sex and all these other things.
Yeah.
An actor's really got to trust the director fully. So the relationship between actor and director is sacred. And I think you have many directors who started as actors are very good at getting performances because of that. I grew up in theater. I was fortunate, I've been fortunate to work quite a bit as an actor, Quantico and Lost and Hawaii Five-0. I'm in a movie that's out today on Hallmark, The Family That Prays, etc. And so I know what it's like to trust a director and then to see the fruits of that from allowing myself to be totally vulnerable. Yeah. And then I've also, on the flip side of that, seen what it's like when an actor doesn't trust the director and they hold on too tight and the performance isn't really there. It's not bad, maybe, but it's not there. So it's my mission as a director, just like you look at, to reference some of those, Ben Affleck, is a wonderful director and started as an actor. Clint Eastwood, obviously, Mel Gibson. You have so many, Tyler Perry, you have so many who really are able to deliver wonderful performances because they understand theater and they understand, what it is as an actor. Clint Eastwood's so prolific and actors really trust him, because he knows how to speak with them. He knows how to make them feel safe. So as a director, my mission is to make the actors feel safe as possible. Part of that is doing my homework and then coming really, 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 really ready. And then letting the actor know, look, my mission is to make the world fall in love with you, right? That's my mission. So on this film with both Stuart Townsend and with Mina Suvari, and also with every other actor, Francis and Mariel, etc., Rebecca, is to say, hey, look, my mission is to make the world fall in love with you, right? I want every man, every woman to just be like, oh my God, he is amazing.
Yeah.
And not only that, I know how to do it. And I'm gonna do it. And so once they trust me completely, then they're willing to go there, then they're willing to be vulnerable, because if they're vulnerable on the screen, the world will identify with them. And in this film, all the actors, Mariel, Francis, Rebecca, and particularly Stuart and Mina, showed vulnerability that is so attractive because it helps us feel, wow, I can do that. I can be that. I can, it's okay for me to falter. I can rise again through that. So, in terms of the friction or the uneasiness or the discomfort serving the end product, I think in any artwork, in a painting, in a song, in a movie, those strokes of certain colors, allow the greater picture. That one chord, in that one song that you loved, it's like a weird outlier. That's the chord that you always remember. And in other words, that's the most vulnerable moment that helps the thing shine. And so I think that we were able to put that on screen here. And I thought the performances were really wonderful. And it's really, that's a collaboration, of mutual trust, and respect and willingness to take risks.
All the things you need in a good relationship. Right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely. Good meaning growing.
yeah. Transformative a
Yeah.
transforming and
Yeah.
evolving relationship. Yeah. Uh, you know, to your point, you really feel like you're watching them, like you're watching Treya and Ken. And so it's like you don't, I don't know. So the actors did do an amazing job that way. So good job. You've been speaking a little bit about interdependence versus codependence indirectly. And uh, how was the subtleties of that to help transform? Because, obviously you have, a breadth of information about interdependence from a spiritual practice, it appears, from an athletic practice, it appears, and from an art form. How do you help others, actors, and everyone on the crew to really work in harmony that way, like we do in nature, versus being attached?
Yeah. Um, so how do I support the interdependence? You mean on a film?
Yeah, because of the in the Tao, I mean, in a Zen approach, you're working with all the elements, you're in harmony with
Mm,
the
mm,
ecosystem.
mm,
But as soon as fear comes in, or
mm,
attachment comes in, or control,
mm, mm,
those that can rock the boat a little bit, uh, or a lot. So, is that
mm,
something that you just do through embodiment on the set, and in working with people in depth as you're preparing them? Or do
mm.
you call that out, or do you help train them a little bit so they can trust that,
Mm.
they are in harmony if they choose to be with the world around them?
Beautiful question. And I've got two sort of brief answers to that, responses to that. One is that I think it's just seeing it in other people, seeing other people's initiative and intuition and courage, and then just supporting that and then following them.
Mm-hmm.
That a good leader, a great leader, a strong leader, in which case, if you're on a set, the director is the leader, that it's following that in other people, being able to follow that. So, for example, on this film, we were shooting and then there was this huge fire in California and we lost a day in a location. Now, that's a lot of pressure. I mean, that's a lot.
Right.
That's
Yeah.
potentially a huge stressor.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I mean, on this set, people really rose to the occasion. Yeah, I
Mm-hmm.
mean, we had this fire that was storming through California. We were renting a house up in
Wow.
Malibu, and it was literally, I don't know, several hundred yards from the house, and the whole hillside was on fire. We had to
Wow.
evacuate, and we've
Wow.
got wall to wall, thousands and thousands of pounds of gear and
Right.
tons of equipment, and it's all under, it's all insured and stuff, but we can't lose many days. We're like
Right.
losing a day is a huge thing on a movie.
Yeah.
And I mean, the
Sure.
number of people who are willing to go up there, that's not their job, to go up there and while this fire was creeping over the hill and load stuff into trucks and into their
Mm,
personal cars,
got chills.
And I mean, it was pandemonium, fire trucks and donkeys and
Mm,
horses and animals running around in North Malibu and Agora. And
wow.
I was so inspired.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so for me, then I'm God, these people are doing this. I'm excited. This is like William Wallace and Braveheart. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
let's go up there, whatever it takes. It becomes more, in other words, being in service to that thing becomes more important than whatever we're doing. This might be foolish. And, the fire trucks saying, you can't go there. We're saying, no, but we're going. We did it,
That's
we did
great.
it. And we went up there and that was like, it was exciting in the way that it was saddening what was happening with this fire and so many people
Right.
losing their homes. But it was exciting to be part of some microcosm of people who are willing to risk beyond themselves. That this is no longer
Mm,
about a movie. This is just the
yeah.
right thing to do. Like we're
Right.
all up there just being solution oriented in a tiny little way we can. Can we let these animals out? What do we do with them? What do we do with the
Mm,
gear? What do we do? How do we support each other? What's valuable? What's not?
yeah.
Just like in the sinking of Titanic and that love story there, what ultimately becomes important
Yeah.
in that instant, what we're doing becomes the most important thing and our giving ourselves. And I mean, when we did that, it was exciting and it was unnerving and it was beautiful. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
we were just moving in a way that you can imagine. So I think it's that in any moment on set, you see somebody doing something and stepping above and beyond and nobody knows they're looking. And I have the opportunity as a director to say, hey, awesome job. Like,
Yeah.
beautiful. Thank you for that. And then
Uh,
and that makes somebody feel seen. Yeah, because
right.
we all want to feel seen. Yeah,
Yeah.
and I think that's one thing. And then the other thing is there is a standard by which then, of course, a director and a producer on the flip side of that needs to drive a ship, and people will be uncomfortable and will get a sense of lost, and they're feeling vulnerable, but they don't want to share it out loud, but they really need somebody to talk to them. And oftentimes that's usually with an actor.
Yeah.
And I've had many experiences on sets, and that's happened, of course. And then on the set, on a few different occasions, a number of different actors came to me in private. And just sometimes minor stuff, saying, hey, I'm not sure about this scene, and what are we going to do here? Or an actor's just on for a day or two and might say, hey, I'm not, they're feeling uneasy about the dialogue or something, and I might take them aside and say, hey, I've got 5 minutes during lunch. I'm going to take it, let's just you and me run it, just you and me, we'll go around, and just me and this person, no one ever knew that moment existed between me and this actor, and we just boom 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 boom, and then say, look, throw the script away, don't worry about it. Like, I'm the director. This isn't going to end up on screen if you're worried about it. Like, I'm here with you. I'm here to support you. So immediately allow that actor to, you know what I'm saying? I'm your fan, man. Like, I want you to be great. My mission is to make you great. You don't have to perform for me. Perform for you. And I'm here to support you in that. And then that once the actor feels seen and safe, boom. And then on a couple different occasions with different actors on this, then it showed up on screen, and the actor was just so present and like glorious, and game changer. And I think that's really the job of a director in every scene with every actor. In order, if they really want to get something that's true and that's vulnerable. So being inspired and following inspiration, and then allowing other people to feel comfortable and safe.
Beautiful. That's love in action. So that's nice of you to extend yourself that way.
What other way is there?
Well, I agree, but not everyone agrees with that. So it's beautiful to see. The other thing that I felt when we speak of service, this film, and I really encourage everyone that's listening to this to see it, and we'll shout out shortly where they can watch it and see it. But being that I been personally touched by the cancer word, and in addition, with family and friends, but I work with clients, and families in this process. So, I've seen this story many times over, like, where the process people go through. And one thing that gets overlooked, when I work with families, is the support person. And that's what Ken was, and everything they're going through, because they have to like show up every day, and they're like, they are more important than me. It's ultimate service, just trying to help this person at this really precarious transition in their life. I just was curious for you, and maybe an extension of Ken, is how that process was for you to really carry that, because I mean, wow, everyone wants Ken as their support person through cancer. I mean,
he's available.
I mean, wow.
If you're not feeling well, Ken Wilber will take care of you.
Yeah.
Look good to me. I want to have somebody cook me vegetables and dice stuff up and go to the market and all that stuff.
Yeah.
I'll take it. Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly. Yeah, and then like the importance of the healing on the other side of that, of course, loss is one thing, but whether, they went through so many years, and obviously he met some of his wall in the middle of that. But if you can share how, one, you transcended that in the film, because it was just so beautifully done. Like I said, Ken might have a long list of people saying, could you come take care of me? But I think also it helps other people that have been in the support position to understand that it's okay to like lose it in that process. And it's not, that's very real. And it's not because you're a bad person. It's just it's heavy. It's a heavy weight when you're dealing with mortality in such a fiery, on the moment experience. But if you can share a little bit about that for you, and how it touched you, and what you've witnessed even in Ken's process of moving from all of that back into his life. I know he's very quiet.
I think there are three throngs of that primarily. One is about how much help is helpful and how much is too much. And I think that he struck that chord, and discovered that in himself and with her, that we want to, if we see someone, I was with someone very close to me many years ago in Hawaii, and we were up on the rocks, and jumping off this area, where it's sort of, there's a cliff and then the waves come up,
Yeah.
and then and she jumped off, and then she was trying to climb back up, and it was a bit of a struggle. It was a little bit of a precarious situation, and it would have been very easy for me to help her up, but I didn't. I waited because I felt she could handle it, and I felt that if I did it, I might baby her too much. Yeah, and then there was a guy next to me who immediately said, "Hey, we went," and I said, "No." And then she got it, and she got it on her own, right? And then she felt so proud, and then she felt boom, confident, and I was watching and ready in the moment,
Yeah.
And later she said to me, "That meant so much to me that you let me do that," right? And then again with my grandmother, Noreen Nash, who's 97 now, amazing. And I used to take her for dinner every week. I'm not a very, I'm outgoing, but I'm sort of a reclusive guy. And so I used to take her for dinner every Monday or every other Monday, once, a couple times a month. And one time, a couple of years ago, she's in her mid 90s, we would go to, she would still get dressed up with the hat and all this stuff. And we went to this restaurant, and it was like really crowded in the front of the restaurant, right? Yeah. And if she gets bumped and falls, that could be it, at that age, and she's fragile. And I'm watching to make sure that she's safe. I'm really paying close attention. But I also want her to do it on her own, because I want her to feel like a woman, I want her to feel independent. And so then, we made our way to the table, and I'm watching her, to make sure like there's no vulnerable, but I'm not taking her arm always, I'm letting her do it on her own. And we got to the table, and then she said to me, she says, "I really love the way you treat me." And I said, "What do you mean?" And she says, "You don't baby me. And she says, I love it. My friends will ask me, can I get you groceries or this, that? And I appreciate all that." She goes, "But you make me stand taller, you make me feel independent, like a woman." Yeah. And I think that, in terms of, being a support person, in this story, Ken and Treya, like Ken is really loving her and devoted to her in such a selfless way that's glorious. And it's a reference point for what's possible in love and in service, but not too much. Letting her also make her own decisions. And if he didn't agree with the decision, he would say, "Hey, I don't agree with this. I don't agree with this, but let's talk about it. And then once we make the decision, ultimately it's your decision, babe, and I'll back you fully." And I think that they came to a very clear agreement about that, which is really well written in the book. For instance, they go to see this healer who's sort of a New Age healer, and Ken is not New Age at all. But people will confuse that. Some sort of critics have misused that term or that understanding. That's fine. And he was very anti-New Age. This guy's transcendent. He's one of the most brilliant authors in history. And I think that at that moment in the 80s, when Treya wanted to explore those, he said, "Hey, this is my thought on it, but it's your, let's go. At the very least, it'll be an exploratory process. Let's do it. I back you 100%." And in this scene, in this movie, we, speak to that. And when they go see this character played by Mira Hemingway, which is a really beautiful, really funny scene. It's that the tension between, and it ends up being a wonderful experience for them. It doesn't matter what the result is. It ends up being a wonderful experience, and that in and of itself is a result. So I think that it's about helping and serving, but not too much, not being forceful, not being too paternal, not being controlling. And then the other aspect of that is, what does it do for ourself, right? That it's one of the paths of enlightenment in a Buddhist sensibility, that service and devotion is the greatest path, one of the greatest paths to enlightenment, right? That we can, by giving ourselves fully, all of a sudden, we don't matter as much. The thing that we're giving ourselves to, or the person we're giving ourselves to, matters so much that we get lost in it. That we don't get lost in the way that we forget ourselves, in the way that it's codependent, in the way that but we get lost in terms of the little me matters less and the big me matters more. The big me meaning the me that lives beyond me, right? And obviously, and most certainly, Ken Wilber gave himself to this woman with such devotion, and it was devastating for him, and yet transformed him. Absolutely. Yeah, after she passed, he wrote, after a period of 5 years of hardly writing at all, he wrote 3 books after she passed. Grace&Grit, Sex Ecology, Spirituality, and A Brief History of Everything.
Mm.
3 books that transformed the worlds of philosophy, spirituality, and psychology, transpersonal or integral psychology. I mean, rocked the world, right?
Yeah.
And many people who will read Ken Wilber's books, 30 books or something, oftentimes No Boundary or Up from Eden or Grace and Grit or A Brief History of Everything will be their first book. And A Brief History of Everything was my first book of his. And then, I mean, it blew me away. It changed my entire life. It changed the way that I perceive and understand consciousness, God, spirituality, myself, the map of the world, evolution, you know, on a gross, subtle, and causal realm, causal realms. You know, and I mean, it blew me away. So that, at the very least, is indicative of the path, how the path of service transformed him. In other words, he wrote in a very short period 3 books that were otherwise dormant and growing inside of him, but that were able to be manifest through this intensive 5+ years of devotion to another being. Now, we can't do it because of that, but ultimately when we are devoted to something, it transforms us. And I think that dovetails back into the question that you asked a little earlier about how am I transformed by this film? By being in service to this for so long, of course, I'm touching cornerstones within myself that understand service better than I did before. You know, I'm here to keep growing, of course, but it makes me better as a friend. It makes me better as a lover. It makes me better as somebody who can support other people psychotherapeutically. It makes me better as a director. It makes me better as a writer. You know, it makes me enjoy life more too and feel more deeply appreciated just to be alive.
Yeah, beautifully said. And for you, what are you going to serve next? Because you know, that you were at the pinnacle. Obviously, we have to share this with the world and let everyone sip it up. But there's always other pots on the stove.
Yes. So the gestation period on a movie can be months, weeks, months, years.
Yeah.
I've got several IP that I'm in development on, that I've been in development on, some for a long time, for a few years, others for months. They're in different stages of book and screenplays and production, pre-production. Predominantly the few that I'm looking at right now, all projects that I own. There are a few. One is called 180, and it's a true story adapted from a book. It's about a guy who is in Northern California, high schooler, doing drugs, getting high, can't find a sense of family, starts doing more drugs and partying more, and he's so charming that he just keeps getting away with it. And then he does harder and harder drugs, coke and X, and then he moves to Miami and he's selling cocaine and he's shooting heroin and he lives on the street and he goes homeless. And then somebody in AA finds him and he goes to AA and he gets a sponsor in AA and he becomes sober. And then he comes back to California. He starts getting in real estate and he makes millions of dollars by the time he's 30, before he's 30.
Wow.
So it's really a story. That's why it's called 180, right? A 180, 180 degree turn.
Yeah.
And it's a story of a regular guy who just hits the bottom and is able to come back up. It's a story about a guy who's always looking for family, didn't quite find it, put it in partying, put it in drugs, put it in debauchery, put it in pushing extreme, then put it in trying to be successful, became successful, and then ultimately became an amazing family man.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Good friend of mine. It's an amazing book. It's a beautiful film. It's kind of like Johnny Depp's Blow meets Wolf of Wall Street. It's called 180. I'll direct. I'll be one of many producers on that. And then I've got another project called Man vs. Ocean. That's also the title of the book. And it's a story about also a regular guy who is down on his luck, and he is in England. And this is a contemporary story. And he's a toaster oven salesman. And he just is fed up with life. Everything's falling apart. And one day he decides to swim the English Channel. And he's not a great swimmer. And he does the English Channel, and it's brutal. Wow. It's freezing. But he does it, and then he finds out about this swims called the 7 Oceans. It's the 7 toughest ocean swims in the world. No one in England had ever done it before. He sets out to do it. It's swimming Catalina to LA, the Molokai Channel, the Sugaru Strait, the English Channel, the Strait of Gibraltar. And because he has such a tough time swimming, he has this problem with his shoulder. He ends up developing a new stroke where he swims like very uniquely, kind of more like a
Yeah.
dolphin and less like a person. And he becomes one of the fastest swimmers
Wow.
in history, deep ocean swimmers. He develops this very unique stroke that is his. And now he goes from like being almost like losing everything in his life.
Yeah.
Now he's happily married. He's in his amazing relationship. He's got a giant lake in England where
Yeah.
people will travel from around the world to come and learn his stroke, to do triathlons, to be deep ocean swimmers. He coaches people to swim these 20-mile swims. He's
Yeah.
amazing. So it's a story of a regular guy. It's kind of like Rocky in the
Yeah.
water, except instead of boxing matches, it's these swims. It's a true
Yeah.
story. It's an epic, inspiring, kind of very Disney-esque, broad pop kind of family movie, upbeat, but beautiful story. And
Yeah.
then the other one that I think will be next. I'm looking at a few different projects. One of them is a studio film, which is not my film, which I would just be on as a director, but it's called Life Coach,
Mm.
and it was written by a dear friend of mine, and it's one of the most brilliant scripts I've ever read.
Oh,
It's
nice.
very much like American Beauty, and that's the story of this guy who's like an Anthony Robbins type of character who starts off on the top. He's on the most popular show. He's got the best book out there as a life coach,
Yeah.
And then we look into his life and we find out that his life is really falling apart, that his relationship is not good with his kid, with his wife, and then his world falls apart. And then in it falling apart, we look deeper and deeper and deeper into it, and he has to surrender fully. And then everything comes back together. He ends up back on top again.
Yeah.
It's very much like American Beauty. It's a sort of drama, dark comedy. It's a very funny film. It's highly stylistic film. And I like that project very much.
Mm. Beautiful. Transformation.
And then I'm also looking at, it's interesting because I started as a writer, producer, director in commercials and in trailers. Yeah. And so I've shot on a yacht, on a Zodiac, on a helicopter, underwater. I've shot car chases. I've shot all the things, that indicate a big budget franchise, thinking forward many years in the future that I want to be able to do those things.
Right.
And I like these brands like Amex and Rolex and Mercedes, these really clear brands. And I like them because they have such clear, they're so clearly identified. And even shooting, as a director, a 2-minute commercial or a 3-minute commercial, it's still just like shooting a feature film. It's
Absolutely.
just truncated. And I think, one of the things for me that I learned from writing and producing commercials and trailers is that we need to know who, what, when, where, why, that it doesn't matter how big the car explosion is. And I was shooting 8 miles off the coast in a helicopter, with the same DP Sean, who I used who collaborated with me on Grace&Grit. A guy's extraordinary. We've got a shorthand. I mean, we were way out shooting underwater. I looked up in the ocean one day and I'm seeing him hang out of a helicopter. We were doing this outrageous shot.
Nice.
And that's really a movie, but it's a 3-minute movie.
Yep.
And it doesn't matter what those shots look like. You still have to care for the characters.
Yeah.
And that to make somebody care for a character in under 2 minutes is a tall order. But if they care for the character, then they can laugh. And those commercials were all funny commercials. So I think that at the end of the day, whatever the project is that I'm doing, whether it's a big budget feature or a commercial or an indie art house picture, my forte as a director is, one, drawing strong emotional performances, getting the audience to care for people, for the characters, and two, making a very little bit look like a lot. In other words, as a creator of commercials, I can make, $100,000 look like $5 million. I can make $1 million look like $10 million.
Yeah.
I can make $5 million look like $50 million. And that's about knowing where and how to shoot and understanding what are the driving moments and what are the moments where the audience is really going to be in it. How do we bring them in? Because if we bring the audience in, we're good. That's it.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow, that's exciting. And I think you have this beautiful opportunity to transform all of us through your art form, which is a gift, and as this film was a gift to many, I think it'll serve on so many different levels. So one, I want to thank you for being in service to it and getting it to this moment. So that's exciting. Can you share with everyone where they can see it? I know it's everywhere, but it's always good for you to share.
Sure. Yeah, it's everywhere. It's in some theaters, North America, so Canada and the United States. International is not set yet, but should be coming soon. but everywhere, Apple, Amazon, Comcast, Rotten
Right.
Tomatoes, you can go Fandango, you can go, it's like everywhere, movie stream, right? Amazon
Yeah.
Prime, etc. Um, and I think that if people like the film, I'd love if people would write a review on Apple, Amazon. I think that a lot of times it's interesting because some critics have really loved this movie, whether it's Screen Rant or the Playlist or Forbes, and then others have been very aggressive against it, and that's
Mm.
fine. And I think that we let the people speak. Let the people
Yeah.
decide, because a lot of times these critics love to see their names in lights, and
Right.
they're never going to attack a film that might threaten their job. But if they
Right.
have the opportunity to attack a beautiful film that they'll never be damaged by, they'll do it, and they do that.
Yeah.
So I think that it's important that if people love a movie like this, is this good for the world? Do we want people consuming art like this?
Yeah.
It is a beautiful thing,
Yeah.
So it only gets out there because people support it. So I think that and that's why I supported it. That's why I
Yeah.
supported making it. Yeah.
Yep.
That's one of the reasons I supported making it. And so if people like it and they love it, if they leave a review and they share it with someone, that's the most wonderful thing that someone can do.
Absolutely. Put it on your
And the
streaming
website's
list.
Grace&Grit.net.
.net. Okay, we'll put that on there too.
Mm.
Yeah, it's and I encourage anyone listening to this or watching this that because it's you might have been touched by these topics. Sometimes people hesitate, but it really, I think Marianne Williamson said really nicely at the Illuminate Festival, it was kind of cathartic, like to watch it. And I would agree, being that I work in this field and then have been touched by it personally many times over, that it it was like it felt comfortable to be in, and not like, oh, I just don't want to touch those. I don't want to see that again. So
It's beautiful what you're saying. The Notebook. She has Alzheimer's, right? And it's not a movie about Alzheimer's. The Fault in Our Stars is about two kids, one with this illness and another one with an illness.
yeah,
And it's not a story about love. It's a story about love.
yeah,
Titanic is not the story about a sinking of a ship. Rust and Bone with Marianne Cotillard, she
yeah,
has no legs in the movie.
yep,
And you never see that in the trailer. It's not a story about a woman, though. It's just a love story. It's an amazing, amazing movie. Love Story, 1970, with Ali MacGraw and Ryan O'Neal. She dies of cancer, and it's one of the greatest love stories ever made.
yeah,
It's not a story about a woman. It's a story about love. It's a story about this
yeah,
guy has to be like, oh my God, I can't stand this woman. Oh my God, I'm in love with this woman. So, oh my God, I'd give anything to get this woman back, right?
yeah,
That's the story.
yeah,
The challenge is just the thing that drives them to get her. It's just a catalyst.
yep,
Yeah. And so if we examine that, and the same thing, like even Black Swan is not a love story, but it's in the way that the challenge is what helps us to rise up, and
yeah,
become more. So thanks for that. I appreciate that. Very
absolutely.
true.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And what a great way that we can experience love during adversity, that we don't have
Mm.
to just be um, a, a hostage to the circumstance. So I
Yes,
think
that's absolutely true.
I think you showed that beautifully. So Sebastian, I really
Thank you.
appreciate you spending the time today. Super excited to assist in circulating this out into the world, and looking forward to your next set of creations.
Your
And then,
fingerprint is, go ahead.
oh, I was going to say, in your regular website, are you okay giving that too? Or can we
Please,
put that below?
please.
Okay.
Yes,
All right.
please.
And what were you going
And
to
I usually
say?
update all sorts of new stuff there. I'm pretty good at updating. We're pretty good at updating that. Thank you for everything you're doing in the world and for how you show up. It's an inspiration, and we're all doing this, exploring this dynamic adventure together, and we're only here for one instant. It's such a pleasure to talk with you. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah. Thank you, Sebastian. Keep up the great work.
Okay.